Answer, do you believe this or don't? I say, I don't know enough in many cases. If somebody tells you a story for 2 minutes and I'm supposed to make a judgment? No, that's not the way we nuclear physicists act. At least this one doesn't.
The true watchdog of truth is someone who advocates objectivity, open-minded examination. You neither accept nor reject until all the evidence has been properly evaluated. And that's all the evidence, pro and con.
No matter what your perception of something is, or your belief, or your opinion, or your speculation, if you want to do the job right, just follow where the evidence takes you. And no matter where it leads you to, no matter what kind of an outcome or result, whether you like the outcome or not, you will always stay credible if you follow the evidence.
The uniqueness of Travis's case is that there's certain aspects you don't see in many other cases. For one, there were several other people who saw him being zapped. It wasn't one man's testimony.
The one witness cases with no physical evidence are pretty easy just to kind of put aside and say, well, I can't say either way. You've got one person telling me a story. Now, when you have 7 people telling you the same story, and those 7 people are all passing on the relevant questions in not just one polygraph, but multiple polygraphs, I don't know of another case. I do not know of any other UFO type of a case that has that much empirical evidence in its favor, just solely based on the polygraph.
Back in those early 70s, there were not...
The night country.
Early 70s, there were not too many polygraph examiners in the state of Arizona. And local law enforcement, small agencies, depended upon either Phoenix Police Department or Tucson to furnish that type of expertise.
I was a police officer for a number of years, and when the Department of Public Safety was instituted in 1968, there were certain things that they were going to furnish in some scientific field, question documents and things like that, and polygraph. They tested several of us, and the outcome was that I was #1 on the list, and then I was sent to New York to a polygraph school in New York City. This was in the fall of 1971, and I've been doing polygraphs ever since.
Cy Gilson, whose opinion was pretty well known and respected as a polygraph examiner. We had used him on other matters, criminal matters and stuff, and always with good results.
We had a meeting of the 6 crew members and the sheriff. Travis's older brother, I think his name was Dwayne, I believe, in the chow hall at the jail. And they finally agreed that they would all submit to this exam. I did tell them briefly what it was like, what was going to be attached to their bodies and why, and gave them some kind of an idea of what they were going to go through during this test.
They came in and talked to us. We got into an argument with them, you know. Some of us have been in trouble with the law before.
I was more scared this day that we came to this courthouse than the day that I seen Travis get zapped. This was the most horrible day because I just knew that we weren't coming out of this.
There was one young man, he was the youngest of the group, sat over sort of to the side and didn't have much input or anything to say. And from past experience with interrogations and so on, someone like that is more likely to admit that it's a sham or whatever. So he's the one I wanted to choose first, because if it was a sham, it would save a lot of time and effort on my part and everybody else. Steve was his first name, but I don't remember the last name.
I always thought they just took Steve because he was young and the most scared.
You know, I was the first one to take the polygraph test because they thought I would crack.
I usually can get a pretty good idea as I go through the exam to know whether or not the questions are profitable in the sense that he's responding to certain specific questions, and then I would have a conclusive examination. And frankly, when I finished with him, I was quite surprised myself because he was passing the exam.
And we were there until 10 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And then the guy tried to walk out without letting us know anything. I didn't like that, so I chased him down. And I told him, you know, we have to know.
I tested each one of them down the line, and they all come out on the positive side. They were being truthful to those relevant questions.
5 of them passed. 1 of them is inconclusive merely because of the person's general nervous tension.
One young guy, I think he was a red-haired fellow. His name was Dallas. That's his last name. And he had been in some minor scrapes or something with the law prior to that. So he was a little bit dubious about taking the exam to start with. He did not cooperate with me at all. They have to cooperate in the sense that they have to sit still, no movements, listen to the questions, a one-word answer, and so on. And he was doing anything he could to disrupt the tracings, which he did, and his test was inconclusive. As far as conclusive examinations of polygraphic of tests, the fact that the 5 that I did test, and they all come out passing the exam in the way that they did, would probably eliminate to the most degree that there'd be one lying and get past me. That would be, I think, impossible in itself.
One of the first polygraph examiners to review the case was Edward Gelb, who in 1978 was president of the American Polygraph Association. He came to the conclusion that the possibility of 5 people telling the same story, passing a polygraph test, and not telling the truth would be 1,000,000 to 1.
That's extremely important. There's a lot of controversy about lie detector tests. Some people state that an honest person can tell the truth and fail. A sociopath can lie and pass. But it would be extraordinarily difficult for 5 people initially to pass that test. Eventually, the 6th did take the test and pass, and Travis and his brother also passed lie detector test after lie detector test.
If that's not sufficient evidence concerning this UFO incident, what are we doing convicting people and condemning them to death on the basis of less testimony than that?
If you only had the evidence of the polygraph, you still have the most well-documented case in UFO history. We also have the tree growth in the immediate vicinity. In the summer of 2014, we went back to the site to do a field survey. It's been so many years since the original incident that we really did not expect to find anything there. But while we were on the site, a discovery was made.
The calculations show that these trees were producing wood fiber at 30-something times the rate they had in the previous 85 years. Other trees exhibited the same kind of changes, and the effect diminished the farther you got from that spot.
Not only was there an extreme growth rate to some of these trees around the clearing, but it seems that there's also a directionality to them.
I started checking stumps at the 4 corners of the compass and discovered that there was a swelling and a thickening of the growth rings in the direction that the craft had been, and not on its opposite side. That was where the thickness of the rings were at the minimum.
Travis and some of the original people who did the first surveys had posited that possibly the cell growth was caused by radiation. I took that a step further and did some digging to see if there's been any academic studies done on radiation and tree growth, and I found at least 1 or 2 related to the Chernobyl incident. A university out of Poland did a study in 1997 that found trees that were exposed to radiation after Chernobyl had grown up to 3 times in volume of accelerated growth as compared to previous years. Our field survey and finding this directionality and possible connection to radiation opened a whole lot of new doors that need to be explored. We're really hoping that we can get certain universities that are experts in tree ring growth involved in this to see if we can actually see if there is a connection.
I think it's important for people to recognize, the weight of evidence that these things do happen.
If you go online and look for UFO reports, you will find in North America alone about 12,000 sightings a year. Now that doesn't mean they're all alien craft, obviously, but there's a lot going on every single day, every day, and people are seeing truly inexplicable things happening.
I mean, how could you possibly believe that we're the only beings in this universe, you know? It's not, there's no way.
We've come a long way in our understanding about the odds of life elsewhere. With, 100 billion stars in the Milky Way? Conservatively, if there was only 10 planets per star, we're talking about 1,000 billion planets. Not all of which would be, you know, life-supporting, of course, but there's just enough believability, just enough numbers of reports to sort of nudge people in the direction of accepting that we're not alone.
The public is becoming more aware and more accepting that there is life out there in the universe, in our galaxy, in fact, and that life has traveled to our Earth.
At the same time, I'm always careful